Hey everyone, and welcome. Whether you're a landlord handing over the keys or a tenant about to move into a new place, the whole rental process can feel, well, a little intimidating. It's all built on a contract, but let's be honest, who actually reads all that fine print? Well, today, we're going to break it all down, the essential rules for both landlords and tenants, so everybody knows exactly where they stand. So, you found the perfect spot, you signed on the dotted line, but what does that piece of paper really mean for you? What happens if the heat goes out in the middle of winter? Or how much can a landlord actually ask you for when it comes to a security deposit? We're going to get into all those answers. Okay, so before we dive into the really tricky stuff, we've got to know who's who in this relationship. Every single rental situation boils down to three core parts. You've got the landlord, you've got the tenant, and you've got the document that connects them. Let's make sure we're all on the same page. First up, the landlord. You might also hear them called the lessor. Now, this could be just one person who owns a single condo, or it could be a huge company that owns thousands of apartments. But either way, they're the ones who own the property and are giving you the right to live there. For a price, of course. And on the other side of that coin, we have the tenants, sometimes called the lessee. That's you, the person paying rent to make that property your home. And while you don't own the building, you do own the right to live there peacefully for the entire length of your agreement. Now, here's something that trips a lot of people up. What's the difference between a lease and a rental agreement? Well, a lease usually locks you in for a fixed amount of time, like a year. A rental agreement is often way more flexible, maybe renewing every single month. And trust me, this isn't just about the words. It's a really crucial detail that changes how fast your whole living situation can be changed or even ended. So you've got this piece of paper in your hands. But is it actually a legally binding contract? What are the absolute must-haves, the non-negotiable things every single valid agreement needs? Well, thankfully, there's a surprisingly easy way to remember them. Yep, that's it. All you have to remember is one simple word, land. It's a fantastic little acronym that serves as your checklist for the 4 essential pillars of any rental contract that'll actually hold up. So let's break that down, shall we? L is for the length of the lease. Is it for a year, 6 months? A is for the amount of rent. Pretty obvious, right? How much are you paying? N is for the names of everyone involved. That means all the tenants and the landlord have to be clearly identified. And finally, D is for a description of the property. We're talking the specific address and the unit number. If your agreement is missing even one of these 4 things, you might not have a valid contract at all. Okay, let's talk about the money, specifically that security deposit. This isn't just some random number a landlord pulls out of thin air. There are actually very strict legal limits on how much they can charge you. Let's start with the most common situation. You're renting an unfurnished apartment. In this case, the law is super clear. A landlord can charge you a maximum of 2 months' rent for the security deposit, on top of your first month's rent. But if the place you're renting comes furnished, that limit gets a little bit of a bump. Because there's a higher risk of damage to all that furniture, a landlord can legally ask for up to 3 months' rent for the deposit. And no matter how much you paid up front, this next number is the one every single tenant needs to burn into their memory. Once you've moved out and handed back the keys, the clock starts ticking for the landlord. They have exactly 21 days, that's 3 weeks, to either give you your full deposit back or provide a detailed, itemized list explaining exactly what they're deducting for. All right, so you're all moved in, the contract is signed, the boxes are unpacked. But this is where the real day-to-day relationship begins. For the whole time you're living there, both you and the landlord have ongoing duties to each other. It's all based on this really important idea called quiet possession, and it's pretty much what it sounds like. It means you, the tenant, have the right to enjoy your home without the landlord just showing up whenever they want. And in return, the landlord has a right to know that their property is being taken care of. It's totally a two-way street. So what happens if something major breaks, like the plumbing? Legally, your landlord has to maintain what's called a habitable property. We're talking about the absolute basics, like working plumbing and heat. If they don't and you've given them written notice and they're ignoring you, you actually have some pretty powerful options. You can use up to 1 month's rent to fix it yourself, though you can only do that twice a year. Or, if the problems are really severe, you might even have the right to just pack up, break the lease, and move out. Nothing lasts forever, and that includes a tenancy. Sooner or later, every lease comes to an end. So let's look at how that can happen. Everything from a simple, planned move-out to the much more serious and complicated process of an eviction. The vast majority of the time, this is super straightforward. If you have a fixed-term lease for a year, it just ends on the date written in the contract. If you're on a month-to-month agreement, either you or the landlord typically just has to give a 30-day notice. Simple as that. But what happens if a tenant breaks a major rule, like not paying the rent? Now, this is so important to understand. A landlord can't just change the locks on you. They can't throw your stuff out on the sidewalk. They have to follow a very specific, very strict legal process. It's called eviction. And that process has 3 main steps. First, the landlord has to give the tenant a formal 3-day notice to pay rent or quit. If that doesn't resolve things, they go to court and file something called an unlawful detainer. That's the actual lawsuit. And finally, if the court sides with the landlord, it issues a writ of possession, which is a legal order for the sheriff's department to come and physically remove the tenant from the property. So you might be wondering, who handles all this stuff? The rent collection, the repairs, sending out notices? Well, while you might deal directly with the property owner, a lot of the time there's a professional right in the middle of everything. And that person is the property manager. You can think of them as the owner's official representative. They're the one you call when you have a leak, the person who collects your rent check, and the one who has to enforce the rules of the building. For all legal purposes, they're acting on the owner's behalf. And here's a cool little piece of local law that a lot of renters don't even know about. In a state like California, for example, if your apartment building has 16 or more units, the owner is legally required to have a manager living right there, on site. It's a rule that helps make sure someone is always around to handle any issues that pop up. So after all that, the big question comes right back to you. Maybe it's time to pull out your own rental agreement. Does it have all the LAND basics? Do you know the specific rules for your security deposit? Do you know what to do if you need a major repair? Remember, your lease isn't just a boring document. It's the official rulebook for your home. So make sure you know the rules and make sure it's working for you.